tears in his eyes, and he said, "They called my little girls burning houses." I never, ever got that image out of my head. So I went to Ted Kennedy, and talked with him about trying to figure out some way to cover kids. He, with the mastery of the Senate that he always displayed, brought Republicans on board, including Orrin Hatch. We worked to create a bipartisan children's health insurance program that was a partnership between the federal government and the states. And they're certainly making more money than would make them eligible for Medicaid. So they were in that, no man's land. So we got it passed. And every year since Bill signed it into law, these 9 to 10 million kids have been taken care of. And I have to tell you, I've done probably a dozen book signings on this most recent trip, and all through my campaign beforehand. People come to my book signings or had come to my campaign events to thank me for CHIP. Yesterday in Austin, today in Little Rock, people came and said thank you. And one young man said, "I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for CHIP. I had cancer as a child, and we ran out of money and we ran out of insurance, and thank goodness the CHIP program was enacted." So under President George W. Bush, under President Barack Obama, CHIP was reauthorized, and the program continued seamlessly. Well, this Congress and this White House have not reauthorized the program, and states are starting to run out of money because, as I say, it's a partnership and they rely on the federal dollars. So by the end of the year, unless it is reauthorized and unless the funding is provided, 9 million children and their families will be facing some very, very dire circumstances. So I can only hope that maybe at the end of the year there'll be some sort of a deal that will provide that continuity. But it's a program that I am very grateful for, that I had some small role in because of the lives it's saved and the futures it's given to so many kids. And it's the kind of thing we should do to take care of each other and to give every child a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential.
Mr. President, 50 years from now, I think the thing that, the economic achievements, the foreign policy achievements, the environmental, I think the thing that you'll be remembered for more than anything else is the Human Genome Project. I really believe that it would have happened. And talk a little bit about that, and it was funded, and what it is and what it can potentially mean to these young people here and their children and on into the future.
Well, first of all, I think one of the most important jobs of the national government is to keep America on the cutting edge of pioneering research and development. And I think that while we were getting rid of the deficit, determined to balance the budget, I wanted to keep us doing that. So I spent $3 billion of your money to sequence the human genome in a big multinational scientific research effort. And then we made a private partnership with Craig Venter, who was pursuing his own private sector sequencing, because I felt that it would have a major impact on the quality and length of life for the next generation and for hundreds of years to come. Assuming we can keep from blowing things up. And so we did it. Now you can get a genome analysis for considerably less than $3 billion. And we know that there has been well over $200 billion of economic activity generated out of that. So your rate of return on your tax dollar investment was about the highest we've ever gotten in the United States for that $3 billion. And so what do we know? We know that there are certain genetic variances which put women at high risk of breast cancer. So we know which women should start taking tests earlier. We know we can, pretty soon we'll have the capacity to send every mother of a young female baby home with basic genetic information. We're learning, we're very close to unlocking the mysteries of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other things. So it's really important. And yes, I agree with you that it matters a great deal. But it's not the only thing. I also made in 5 minutes a decision to put GPS into the public domain. That made a huge difference. A lot of people didn't want to do that. 20 years ago, we started the first cybersecurity unit in the national government, and we should have kept it going. Last year, Israel got half of all the private capital in the world in capital investment in cybersecurity. That should bother you, because even though they're our allies, the United States should be way, way ahead of that in cybersecurity investment, and Congress wasn't all that interested in it. But this is a very big deal. We spent the first $500 million of your money, this was all in bipartisan way, by the way, in nanotechnology. And one of the most interesting days I had when I was out campaigning for Hillary was in eastern Kentucky, in the middle of Appalachia, in the easternmost university, Morehead State. They asked me to take a while to look at their nanotechnology program, which they were doing with NASA. With the first $500 million and its successors, we got appropriated. So they're building in eastern Kentucky, in the middle of what used to be coal country, 8-pound satellites for $1 million satellite into a little box about an inch. Mr. President, he said, "Could I tell you one more thing?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Tell Hillary not to take it when people make fun of her for saying she's going to put up 500 million solar panels." He said, "Actually, I think she's a little low." I said, "I am not in the United States. I am not." And I said, "Why do you think she's a little low?" He says, "Because before you know it, we'll be making solar panels with 3D printers just like I made this little tungsten container. And when we do, they'll be cheap as dirt and just as good, and we'll all be free." I thought to myself, now why am I telling you this? Because that young man did not feel the walls closing in on him. He felt the walls opening up. So he voted for the person he thought would open the most doors, not the people who would build the most walls. Now, wait. Why am I telling you this? Because I tried. Look, I tried not to do anything stupid in 92. I wanted to get elected. I tried to find a way to say whatever I was going to say that I knew might be dangerously unpopular. But I did try to level with people and tell them we could not roll back the tides. We ought to be going with the future and building a future we could all share. And we had to be both responsible and opportunistic if we wanted to build a future we could all share. But at the time, it was easier. I mean, we put out this little booklet. And in fairness, Paul Tsongas put out a little booklet, you remember? So you had to have, you had to be kind of a nerd if you supported Tsongas or me. And we got over 60% of the vote between the two of us in a 6-person race. Why? Because people realized then they were actually hiring people to do a job. And it made a difference if you knew anything. And, it was really important. You weren't being hired. I mean, and I owe it to a lot of these people from Arkansas. We had 1 month in the previous 8 years, only one, where our unemployment was below the national average until the year I ran for president, and we led the country along with Nebraska in job growth every single month of 1992. It takes a long time to turn an economy around. The same expert that said we had the worst school system in the country in 78 said in 1992 we had one of the two most improved school systems in the country, thanks in no small measure to Hillary's work on that. And the other state was South Carolina, and I made Dick Riley Secretary of Education for 8 years. In other words, we thought these were jobs, and our job was to create more kids everywhere without regard to race or religion or gender or identity, like that kid in eastern Kentucky making the nanotechnology satellites. So, I want you to think about that, because they say that Snapchat's 10 seconds. I felt like a great moral victory had been won for civilization when Twitter announced they were going from 140 to 280 characters. I thought, oh, the nerds of the world can rejoice. Those of us who love Twitter. I mean, you're laughing. And I want you to laugh, but I want you to think. Being president is a job. You hire somebody to do a job. You have to say where things are, where you want to go, how you propose to get from here to there, and how we're all going to do it together and benefit together. You have to put people first, but it's more than a slogan. You got to have some idea about how to get there. And I consider it the greatest honor of my life that, first of all, I had this laboratory of training as a governor here for all those years. And secondly, that I got to start at a time when grassroots politics still mattered. And when people listened to each other. And they didn't just want to think of some new put down. And it wasn't a question of whose resentment was better than somebody else's. It was who had better answers. And in the end, if you believe in putting people first, you have to have an other-directed politics. It may not work for the people who are communicating for you in the political media. That may not be the most financially remunerative or emotionally successful strategy, but in the end, that's what counts. And I'm proud of her for getting caught trying to put people first for the rest of our lives together.
And if you understood that there were setbacks in life, that you would ultimately achieve your goal. This has been a hard year for parents. So try to help us and help these young people how we talk about these things in light of the events a little over a year ago.
Well, I wrote a book, What Happened, and it's really a book about resilience, personal resilience as well as national resilience, because I do think everybody gets knocked down, and the real question is, are you going to get back up? And not everybody will lose a presidential election, but everybody will suffer loss. And so the core of the message, James, that we were told and that we try to tell our kids remains absolutely true. You have to find ways to overcome disappointment, to find strength, and for me it was my family, my friends, my faith. It was a lot of long walks in the woods, yoga, alternate nostril breathing. I highly recommend it. It was also, cleaning my closets, jobs that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, reading a lot of mysteries because the bad guy always got it in the end. But trying to fall back on the consistent message that I certainly got from my parents, and that I've tried to impart to my daughter, and will likewise try to do the same with my grandchildren. Life is not always fair. The struggle doesn't always go the way that you hoped or planned. But life is too short to give in to the kind of disappointment or despair that comes with losing or with suffering some kind of setback. And so for me, it was getting back up and taking stock of where I was and where I thought the country was. Because I think also, in this particular case over the past year, the country, at least a majority of the country, has similarly felt that something went amiss. And what I've tried to do, I've got a new organization called Onward Together, is to support individuals and groups that are really harnessing a lot of the grassroots activism and energy that is out there, to try to push back against some of the changes that are being imposed from Washington, and ultimately win some elections. And I was really heartened by what happened in Virginia about 10 days ago. So I think the general message remains the same, but I also think that we have to be willing to kind of pick apart everything that led to the defeat in 2016. And I try to do that in this book because obviously I talk about the shortcomings I had and that my campaign had, and ultimately I am responsible because it was my name on the ballot. But there were other forces at work, and it was like a perfect storm. There was a lot that was happening that was unprecedented. Whether it was the intervention by the FBI at the last minute for no good reason, or Russia, which we're learning about more every single day, or suppressing the vote, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the country unfairly prevented from voting, even though they're just as much a citizen and just as registered and just tried as hard as they could, but couldn't cross the barriers that have been erected since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. So when I talk about what happened, I'm very focused on making sure it doesn't happen again. So that's why I am speaking out and going to continue to speak out, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to have an election in 2018 that's about real things. This has been one of the challenges for Bill and me. I'll be just very clear about that over the last several years. You've heard him talk about how much he loved getting out around Arkansas, listening to people. I was with him every step of the way. When I did the education standards, we held hearings in every county in the state. I mean, we were so in touch with and able to listen to thousands and thousands of Arkansans and, try to take that on board and figure out, okay, what are we going to do? But we also had a clearer channel for communication. Unfortunately, our body politics, immune system has been impaired because there has been a concerted effort starting with the creation of the Fox network. It wasn't there when Bill first ran. It was one of the reasons he probably survived. It was there when he ran the second time. It and all of its, associated media outlets who are by no means delivering news. They're delivering partisan advocacy positions, irrespective of the truth, the facts, the evidence. And I think we've got to stand up, regardless of what party, regardless of our own ideological beliefs. A democracy depends upon an informed citizenry that has access to accurate information. And I will tell you that there is no such thing as an alternative fact. It does not exist in politics or in nature. And it was astonishing to me, the things people believed about me in this campaign. And some of my Arkansas Traveler friends and other friends of mine from literally my childhood to adulthood and all of the places that I've lived and worked, and they were out there knocking on doors and calling people. And they would run into folks, or they'd get somebody on the front porch, and they'd say, I'm here campaigning for Hillary Clinton. I've known her since 6th grade. I went to law school with her. I worked with her at the Children's Defense Fund, whatever they were identifying themselves at. And I would like you to support her. And more times than you could believe, they would get an answer like, I can't support her. She killed somebody. I can't support her. She runs a child trafficking ring in the basement of a pizzeria. And my friends would be totally bewildered. And they'd say, no, she didn't. I know her. I've known her for decades. No, she didn't. Oh, yeah, I saw it on the internet. And now we know that Russia was sending a lot of those messages on the internet. They were weaponizing information, stealing information, providing phony news. So there's reason to be disappointed and reason to feel like, we didn't succeed, and that's hard to live with, very painful. But there's also a call to action. We cannot let our politics be turned into a fiction that benefits a very small minority of Americans. And I'm going to keep speaking out. Apparently, my former opponent is obsessed with my speaking out. Apparently there was somebody told me, tweet today. Honestly, between tweeting and golfing, how does he get anything done? I don't understand it. So, maybe that's the whole point. But yes, resilience is the key. And it's not only the key for individuals, it's the key for our country. And therefore, we have to take every election seriously, not just presidential elections. We need to vote in every election. This 2018 election is going to be really, really important for our country. And the best antidote to disappointment is to keep fighting and keep working and be successful. And that's what we intend to do on behalf of the country that we love and that, we've tried in our own ways to serve over all these years.
So I'm going to turn to the man from hope, the peddler of optimism, the man that's always looking, don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Talking about tomorrow, tell us at this hour of our despair why you believe America's best days are still ahead of it. And I know you believe that. You've always believed it. And what do we do? How do we make sure that happens?
Well, first of all, we are the best positioned country in the world for the future. So if we screw this up, it will require a lot of willful blindness. And look, in the last election, she won the popular vote. And it would have been, and if the voters, we have a slight disagreement about this, about what really happened. If the voters hadn't been told that the email, the first email issue was the most important issue since the end of World War II, I doubt if the FBI director could have swung the election at the end. I think it was, we all got to get back in harness here and try to get ourselves a basic framework beyond which we will not go in arguing these issues, so that we're not just out there in la-la land. But I'll tell you why you should be optimistic. Because having lost it, I can tell you youth matters. And we are one of the youngest big countries on earth. You should be optimistic because we have so many immigrants, because like every other wealthy country, the birth rate among our native born is going down to barely replacement level. So in order for us to continue to grow and get active in new economic areas, we have to have more young people. You should be optimistic because, notwithstanding what you're told, if you count the documented and the undocumented immigrants in this country, the crime rate is 1/2 that of the native born. You should be optimistic because we have people here from everywhere. And if you count all the terrible things that have been done by Muslims expressing violent resentment about aspects of American life in the modern world, their murder rate is 1/3 that of the native born. Now, we got to stop this silliness and get down to lick log here. If you want to just indulge resentment, you can. The problem with the people who didn't vote for her and don't listen to me anymore and think I'm, gone over to the dark side, is that they live in places not with a lot of immigrants or a lot of Muslims or a lot of people who have been transgender or a lot of anything else. They live in places where there is not enough mobility, because there is not enough investment, because there is not a national network of broadband that puts everybody in the global economy, because nobody will stand up there and say, yeah, our differences matter, but what we have in common is way more important. The genome, which James Carville started with, he said, this will be my greatest legacy. You know what every one of you should know about it? It doesn't matter if you can figure out how we can all live to be 120. Remember this, every non-age-related difference in this vast crowd today, every single one, is rooted in 1/2 of 1% of your genome. Now, there are 3.6 billion genomes in a body. So even 0.5% is a substantial number. But it's peanuts compared to the 99.5% that we all share, without regard to gender or race or body shape or eye color or you name it. Why then must we obsess for 99.5% of the time about the 0.5% of ourselves that are different? Why shouldn't we spend just a little more time? If we really put people first again, we would think about how we could share the future. But I'm optimistic about America because of our diversity and because of what we did in the genome, because of where we are in science and technology, because we rank first or second in the world among all advanced countries in the ability to fight climate change by generating energy from the sun, the wind, and other clean sources. Because you name it, just name me one single solitary thing. We're leading the world still in material science and all this other stuff. We got more than enough juice to get back in the front of the pack on, internet security, all this information technology stuff. The only thing that's getting in our way is our stupid politics. Our insistence on putting, special interests ahead of the general interest, on deciding when we will go and when we will not go to vote based on whether we feel enthused. And I feel, look, this is mostly a problem for my party, and I am unsympathetic. Thank you very much. Stop griping when they take your votes away. Stop griping when they redistrict your congressional district and your state representative district. If you had showed up at midterm in every one of these elections, it probably wouldn't have happened. And so, do I approve of it? No, I don't approve of it. I think it should be illegal and unconstitutional. But we are getting in our own way. We could build the most modern infrastructure of any country in the world, and interest rates are still low. We can build alliances around the world. We can tweak our trade agreements if they need improvement, but we shouldn't run away from the rest of the world. That's what I think. You should be optimistic. We're the best positioned country in the world. All you got to do is have a politics that thinks about the future of these children here instead of whether you can win a cheap shot by driving a stake between Americans in the short run.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I don't feel strongly about this.
That's 2 points that I want to make before we leave, and to me they're very important. The first one is, on the way over here, I got a call from my best friend, best political advisor, Paul Begala, who reminded me that they do, Gallup or someone does a survey of the most admired women in a country. And the person who has won that survey most often in all of its existence is one Hillary Rodham Clinton. So I kind of thought you would like that. That is my favorite statistic. I came to this morning, and then I was on the phone and doing research, and then I came in, I talked to the president. So I think I'm right. I will probably be fact-checked on this, but I think I'm on really solid ground. In the last 35 years, a Clinton has run for public office, has put themselves before the voters 18 times. President Clinton, 11. Secretary Clinton, 7 times you have run. Do you know of the 18 times how many a Clinton has gotten the most votes? That would be 18. Nick Saban couldn't do that. Okay? You are, in 35 years, you are 18-0. So I got to tell you this. Somebody somewhere out there really loves you guys. That's a heck of a record. So,
James, could I before we close, I just want to say a really heartfelt word of thank you to our team here at the Presidential Center in the library. I want to thank everybody, but in particular, I want to thank Bruce Lindsay and Stephanie Street and Lena Moore and everybody who works for them and with them. In a minute, we'll hear from Skip Rutherford. I want to thank Skip and the great team at the Clinton School. We are really proud of what the center and the library and the school are doing, and we didn't want the time to pass without thanking, and of course we want to thank the Campuras family, who've been friends of ours for a really long time, for sponsoring the lecture series.
And I want to say, we're very reluctant to start recognizing people. We've already mentioned the Arkansas travelers. Thank you for going not only to New Hampshire, but to Georgia, to Florida, Missouri, and other places. There are a lot of people here who were in that 92 campaign. David and D.G. Wilhelm, Frank Greer, and Stephanie Solane. Thank you very much, Harry Thomason, for coming back from California. And everybody was in that 92 campaign. It's different now. But one thing shouldn't be different. We should still be able to talk to our friends and neighbors about things that are about their lives without having people whose sole goal is to gain power by discrediting, disabusing, confusing people and abolishing the line between fact and fiction and truth and lie, triumphing. So if you want to think about something for next time, think about how to get people to vote at midterm, and then think about how the next generation can do a better job than I could anymore in a Snapchat, Twitter world, to create space to remind people, as my great Uncle Buddy used to say, when people make you mad, they're trying to stop you thinking, and there's something to be said for thinking. So I want to thank you all, and just let you know that if you don't stop thinking about tomorrow, and you never forget that we got to go together, and you never forget that our racial diversity makes us smarter and better, that our gender diversity makes us smarter than better, that our ethnic diversity makes us smarter than better, and that diverse groups of people make better decisions than lone genius or homogeneous groups. Don't forget that. Now, I was thinking about all the people here who've been press spokespeople for me. They were always saying, "What's your crazy boss reading today? And what in the hell does that mean?" Excuse me. But that's what I want for you. Ask yourself how you're going to keep score as we claw our way through this mess. Look at your kids. Look at your grandkids. Look at the young people here. All that matters is whether people are better off when you quit than when you started, and whether those kids have a brighter future. And to do that, people have to be coming together instead of being torn apart. As one of Hillary's favorite phrases, all the rest is background music. Play the main theme. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Thank you.
Please welcome Skip Rutherford, Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service.
Thank you. Thank you, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and James. It's always great having you back. I want to thank you, Clintons, not only for your candor, but for your inspiration. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful program. I want to thank the